grew up in a very good family. I was very active. We did a lot of family events together. In school, I was very involved. I was on honor roll. I always had a 3.85 to a 4.0 GPA. And, I had very good long-term goals for life. It wasn't until after my sophomore year when I was in a very bad car accident. It was actually November 17th of 2002. I was in the passenger seat of a Mustang going over Blewett Pass, and we hit black ice. I was asleep and my seat was laid back all the way. I was reported dead at the scene and immediately got airlifted to Wenatchee Valley. I was later on transported to the Good Samaritan Brain Trauma Center after I was in a coma. They had put me in a drug-induced coma due to swelling in my brain and brain damage. Once I got over to the Good Samaritan Brain Trauma Center, that was where I learned how to walk and talk again. I had a lot of cognitive problems, so I was in therapy for that, as well as physical problems with my hand, my arm. It went through the windshield. It wasn't until about 4 months later I realized that I had back problems. They didn't notice that at the time because they were so worried about my traumatic brain injury that they weren't focused on that. So after I got back into school, I was in special ed my sophomore year, and that was pretty traumatic in itself. I didn't know who anybody was. I didn't know much. I was in special ed, and so it was pretty much a whole new start at life for me. I had then been prescribed Percocet painkillers and was on that for years. My body had become dependent on those, and I was taking much more than prescribed. Finally, I was out of high school, went to school to be a cosmetologist, so I was on my feet all day doing hair, and I couldn't handle the pain. I had problems with my insurance, and before I knew it, I was introduced to heroin. As soon as that happened, shortly after it had taken over my life, I had lost everything. I lost my kids, my family, all my vehicles, everything materialistic that I had, and I was isolating a lot. I had finally convinced myself that that's just how it was supposed to be, and I didn't have a way out. I didn't know what to blame it on. I couldn't compromise with it at all. And I had excuses for everything. Before long, it was the guilt and the shame and the resentments and the denial that all started to add up, and before I knew it, I didn't even know what the truth was anymore. Addiction had then turned to heroin, and before I knew it, I was injecting heroin. I had overdosed. I'd been hit with Narcan in 2013 and survived that, and that wasn't enough to stop me. Going to jail was no big deal to me, and I didn't think anything of it. I was hanging out with the wrong people. I was always at the wrong place at the wrong time. And after years of living this, I had convinced myself that, I was put on this planet to be an addict. I was actually in my grips of addiction for about 4 years. I was in numerous very, very unhealthy relationships, and I was in the game of addiction, and my everyday life depended on, getting money, getting drugs, and getting high. And so, after that became repetitive and that was my lifestyle, I decided that I needed to get away from the relationships that I was in because it was just making it worse, and everything was because of the relationship that I was in. And I actually got clean for a couple years, and I had my oldest daughter. And I was clean through all of that. And it wasn't long after that her dad and I had moved apart from each other, and the relationship that we had didn't work out because I had turned to somebody else that was in active addiction. And when that happened, before I knew it, it was in my hands again. And then again, it started with the pain pills. And I'd gotten married and found out that I was pregnant with my youngest daughter. And so to get away from it all, I thought, okay, I'm gonna move to Arizona. I had my youngest daughter down in Arizona, lived with my sister and her husband, and then I got back into the active addiction down there. It wasn't long until I said, okay, I'm getting out of here and I'm moving. Thought it was a novel idea to move back home. As soon as I got home, it was about 2 weeks later, and I was back into the heroin addiction again. I had lost both my kids by this time, and I had nothing. I had called my parents one day and said, I am at rock bottom and I'm ready to go to treatment. They had done an intervention on me. I had ran from the intervention and I was not ready. As soon as I called my parents and said I'm ready for treatment, they put me on an airplane the next morning to Southern California. I got to treatment in Southern California. I was there for 10 days, and on Christmas I dipped out and ran. And that was about the time that I started getting in trouble with the law. That was my life behind bars for years. I had been in and out of jail weekly, and before I knew it, the people that I was running with, I built this ego and pride, and it was ego and pride, you know, come at a whole different perspective, and it led me to going to prison. I was with the wrong people, and I got charged with first-degree armed robbery. I got super lucky that I only got served with 36 months. My first offer was 14 years. Going to prison, you know, I was in maximum security a good majority of the time that I was in there. And, you know, I had a lot of time to myself. And in that process, you know, it gave me a lot of time to think about how I grew up and the family that I grew up in and what I turned to, and how if I got out, that if I would have went back to the same drug lifestyle, that I'd be right back in there. And I knew that I was capable of living something other than that. When I had 6 months left, I said, I'm gonna go hit 12-step meeting, and it changed my life. My clean date is January 5th of 2016. I got clean my last 6 months in prison, and now it's awesome because I get to go back in there and speak and share my story, you know, and it gives a lot of the girls that I was really close with and there a lot of hope that think that they have nothing when they get out. And so that has been one of the most awesome things I've been able to do so far. You know, I say I hit rock bottom, you know, getting hit with a prison sentence, but today I'll say it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. That was kind of the beginning of, you know, I'm gonna make the impossible possible. So today I am working at Family Health Centers as a opioid peer support counselor / recovery coach. It was a fabulous opportunity and I love every minute of it today. I've bought a house. I have a very great relationship, you know, with my family again, with my kids. My old man and I have a very strong relationship that's based around recovery. He's an addict in recovery as well. Being with somebody in active recovery is, it's amazing, you know, and I will, you know, say that it was awesome to be able, you know, he had wanted to be with me since day one. Then he met me in the meetings and he didn't have very much clean time. And I said, oh, when you have a year, we'll talk. And, you know, so it was just over and over, you know. And so finally he sent my mom a text message when I was in a meeting. He said, I'm gonna marry your daughter one day. And she's like, in your next lifetime. And, you know, so to be able to, you know, be years later, you know, be in that relationship, it makes me so thankful that, you know, we waited to have a year clean to start that relationship, you know, and build that friendship, you know, on trust and communication before we ever made anything of it. And it was actually last weekend he proposed to me at a meeting. Having a relationship based around recovery, and you know, I think a huge part of it is being able to understand each other. And I never realized how big honesty and communication was, and you know, learning how to compromise. And it's not all about me, you know, and so it's awesome.